I think this is historic. The state and the counties have never worked so closely before. Doesn't mean we don't have issues and complexities, but given the Byzantine framework that ties the counties and local government to the state government and all the different funding streams back and forth, we've been making some remarkable progress. And for the public at large, in a democracy, people do expect that they can understand what it is their public servants are doing. That becomes, in some ways, impossible, but always challenging when you have such an intertwining of money and responsibility, as we do, all across the system, in crime fighting, in penology, in welfare, child care, all sorts of local government of one kind or another, certainly in the whole Medi-Cal business. But California is a progressive state. We're in the forefront. We're doing a lot of bold things. Certainly, the abolition of redevelopment, which pumped an enormous amount of money and will continue to into the counties, was something that was long overdue, something not expected when redevelopment was first enacted, and it had its own evolutionary changes over time, affected by Prop 13, affected by the rapid run-up in property values. All that created a lot of moving around of money. Some counties, I think 12% of the property tax was diverted from schools, counties, and cities. So we have straightened that out, an historic change. But of course, we're still involved in 70 different lawsuits, and there will be wind-down issues that are still going on. But it's an attempt to deal with this thing that after Prop 13, and I was there for the bailout, I have to say, even that bailout back in 1978, that wasn't all that clear either. And that's kind of the order of the day. We have to deal with the unknown. I can't resist. I have to give you one Latin phrase, if I could. There's a Latin saying, ignota per ignotius. And ignota is unknown, and ignotius is the more unknown. And the idea is people who try to solve one unknown by resorting to something even more unknown. That's kind of what we do around here. Think about it. And we got a lot of unknowns, a lot of unknowns. But through it all, the budget is balanced, I would say rather precariously, but it is balanced. I know you have your own issues. We've got retirement liabilities, retirement health care, and all that is out there waiting for us. But we're making progress. Proposition 30 was another step in embedding constitutional protection for funding streams to pay for responsibilities that the counties have assumed. And that's very important. It was something we weren't sure about. When we started, there were a lot of skeptics who said Proposition 30 can't pass, but it did pass. And so you have that guarantee. I was around as a mayor for Proposition 1A. And this business, in fact, I remember back before that, when Ronald Reagan was governor, SB 90. So the state has to do something. That's called mandates. And when you think about it, state government, how can state government operate? It doesn't pick up the trash. It doesn't operate like a local policeman. It doesn't run a school. It sends out messages or commands or what we call mandates. So do this, county. Then the counties all get together and we got SB 90. So now the state has to pay for something. If we tell you what to do, and we have a mandate commission. It's all very complicated. And one decade after another, this is the way this rather complicated marriage between state and county government. But I would say in the last 2 years, we have clarified and we've strengthened. And we've all benefited by our collaboration together. So we've got this far. Realignment is happening. And of course, I was thinking about realignment, and I thought about other projects. People are saying, oh, something's happening here. It's not perfect. And I was reading the obituary of the first general director of BART. He was a big promoter of BART. A lot of skeptics. San Mateo pulled out. Nah, we don't want BART. Marin County pulled out. We don't want BART. So it's just left to San Francisco, Alameda, Contra Costa. So they financed it. They had a bond issue. My father was governor, and it took 66 2/3. So they got it lowered to 60, and it passed with a little more than 61% of the vote. Very close. So this guy Stokes, he's the public relations guy. They put him in there, and it's going along and gets the train going in Oakland. Finally, they're going to get the tube, and I can't remember exactly what the event was, but he had the press out there, and the damn train runs, and it runs into a parking lot. And all the press was there. That was not a good day. He was forced out shortly thereafter. But he was the one that got it done. So that's generally the way it is. A prophet is not without honor in his own country. You who still read the New Testament know that. So I'm just holding on to whatever honor I can grasp in these declining years. So we've got a lot of stuff going here. And realignment, we work at it. It's like even newspapers. Sometimes they borrow lots of money and they buy a paper they think they're going to make money, and they got to lay off their workers because they didn't calculate right. They make mistakes. Some of them then go on and do fine over time. So life is about 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And that's true whether you're a newspaper, whether you're a bank, sometimes they take a lot of steps back, whether you're a church, or whether you're the state government or the county government. So the condition is that we succeed, we falter, but if we pull together, we look clearly, we discuss, we share, and then we can move forward. That's where we are. So now we got another bold move. We haven't finished working out the realignment and the mental health programs and all these different things, because the realignment is just not about fewer people in prison. It's about dealing with mental health, it's dealing with drug treatment, it's dealing with family stability. It's dealing with a lot of stuff. And so when we're up here in Sacramento, people think it's the state, solve the prison problem. Okay, no, it's a system. And you're in it, and I'm in it, and all 38 million people are in it. And when we do, we'll pull the string over here, it affects something over here. So that understanding of the systemic character of what it is we do here is fundamental. Because then we don't just rob Peter to pay Paul. We think about the consequences. So now we've got our Medi-Cal expansion. A lot of states, dozens of states, have said, no thanks. We're not going there. Affordable Care Act, we're not going to expand under Medi-Cal. Federal government, you take care of that. California didn't do that. Despite all our challenges, all our pension liabilities, all the things we got, we're forging boldly ahead. January, I said, well, we got 2 ideas. We could have the counties run it, state could run it. So I heard you said you don't want to run that. You want the state to do it. Okay. We said, good idea. Now, as we take up 2 to 3 million more people, that's going to cost some money. And by the way, a lot of that money will be paid, at least for a few years, by the federal government. But a lot of it is going to be paid by the state of California on a 50-50 sharing formula. We don't know. Is that 100 million? Is that $1 billion? Uncertainty. A lot of uncertainty out there abounds. And there's uncertainty about revenues that come in. There's certain fees that have been enacted that generate revenue, that go into the Medi-Cal spending. Do we get those? Do we not? Depends on actions in Washington, not in Sacramento. And then we make predictions about who signs up and what things cost and all the rest. So there's uncertainty out there. One thing we know, though, the point of adding another 2 or 3 million people who are indigent and who are your responsibility as counties is to put them in a state system. That's the idea. That is the affordable care notion of expanding Medi-Cal. That's what Texas and Georgia and Florida and North Carolina don't want to do. And we're going to do it because we think it's the right thing, and health care is something that we want to expand smartly, but to as many people as we can. Now, as we take over your responsibility, we don't want to pay for what we're now doing, because that's paying twice. And it would be very hard for us to say, we're going to expand this program, but we're going to double pay for the 3 million people we're taking. Now, I know it isn't that clear. How much do you save? How much are we assuming? That has to be worked out. But in principle, If you have family A and you take care of them under your indigent care, and all of a sudden Medi-Cal takes care of them, then you got to shift that money to us. If you don't shift that money, we can't expand. So it all ties together. Now, it's very possible that the state could take more than it is assumed by way of responsibility. Take more money away, but not exactly in the amount of responsibility that has been assumed. So we want to be careful. I'm not saying it's the details are absolutely knowable at this point in time, but the principle is clear. The state, among the few, is boldly expanding Medi-Cal under the state auspices. In order to do that, we have to take some of those savings, or we can't afford it. A lot of people say we got a lot of money. Well, they have a Ouija board. I don't. And even if I had, I wouldn't be confident. I was told in Catholic school that to rely on a Ouija board was sinful. Probably don't even remember that anymore. Does anybody remember that Ouija boards were sinful? I forget what it was. Was it blasphemy or something? Witchcraft? Something or other I remember. The only thing I remember is don't rely on a Ouija board. So I hope they don't do that around here either, because we have a pretty reasonable prediction of our revenue. Okay, and I don't want to make bets on, how the stocks are going to do, because that's a lot of it. Even the legislative analyst said, hey, you got some more money, but then when you read down a few paragraphs, it was kind of a trick press release, but don't spend it, because it might not be there. So that's kind of the way we talk. That's the way we speak here. You have to read the tea leaves. Not the Ouija board, but the tea leaves. And one thing we know about economists, they can't predict the future. They can't. So we want to be prudent, not exuberant. Or maybe we could be exuberant in our prudence. But we have to be careful, because we have a boom and bust cycle. Earl Warren left a surplus to Goodwin Knight when he became Chief Justice. Why do you have a surplus? Because we had wage and price controls during World War II, and they couldn't spend the money. They just collected it, and from the boom of the war industry, California got a lot of money in taxes. Then Goodwin J. Knight spent it, as many governors do, and when my father came in, what was the first order of business in 1959? Raise taxes. By the way, he tried to raise the oil severance, and the oil people beat his brains out. He didn't get that oil severance. So then he sells along for 8 years. He leaves. Ronald Reagan comes in. Lo and behold, we got a problem. He got to raise taxes. And he lowers property taxes in kind of a little interesting shuffle. He lowered some taxes, but he raised more. And then a few years later, we get into 73, 74 recession, Arab oil embargo, raise taxes more at the trough when revenues are artificially depressed. And so I thought I had a deficit when I came in 75, but lo and behold, within a year, it's a surplus. And the revenues are surging at 17% a year. Pretty soon on a budget of $24 billion, we got a surplus of $5 billion. Never happened before, never happened again. So then what happens? 81, 82, we get another recession. Volcker ratchets down the interest rates, tightens it up, wrings inflation out. Now we have $1 billion, what I call a little baby deficit that I gave to Duke Magian. And Duke Magian has some trigger cuts or triggered sales taxes, and he never invoked them. Oh, life was okay. We don't need to do that. Don't need to raise the tax. So he leaves town, kind of popular. Nobody quite knew what he did, but it didn't do anything. It wasn't that memorable, and in this business, the less memorable sometimes the better. So he leaves town, and Pete Wilson shows up, and wouldn't be a few years, the whole bottom falls out. Same story all over again. Cut massively, 91 realignment, raise taxes. Lots of taxes. Biggest tax increase, I think, maybe a little bigger than Reagan, which was also the biggest tax increase. So he gets the money. Lo and behold, it's the 90s. It starts getting better. Clinton's there. Maybe our first little bubble's going. And so Wilson leaves. Gray Davis comes in, wins by 22%. Wow, it's Christmas. So he starts spending, gets pensions, 3% at 50. It's Christmas time. All of a sudden, .com, down it goes. Davis barely gets reelected, and then they recall him. Big deficit, okay? Then Arnold comes in. Got to blow up the boxes, terminate. Very exciting. A couple more years down the road, Zappo, $60 billion in deficit. They do a little bit of their legerdemain, or whatever you want to call it, and we're down to $27 billion. So we got it down. Now we're down to zero. So now what is the story going forward? Are we going to have our little boomlet? Maybe it's a boomlet for a year, 2, 3, 4, and then it's going to get down again? Or are we going to have a prudent budgeting, not assume, that everything's fine, the money's going to come, that the enterprise zones that hiring, are investing in strip clubs will somehow create a better economy for California? No, I think we got to be adult, we got to be sensible, we got to be compassionate, but it is not compassionate to promise and then to renege. Here you go, now take it back. That's called the cliff effect. You fall off. And it's a lot easier to adjust to a stable flow of funds going forward than a big injection, kind of a steroid high that then gives way to the hangover of deficits, the delegitimization of government, the growing discontent with public service. So for all those reasons, I want you to share at least $300 million with the state. So that's the bottom line. All that rhetoric, it's just, give me $300 million, we'll call it a day for this year. No, that's what the legislature put in. We'll work it through. We're going to listen. I'm going to meet with your experts later, and we'll have very esoteric conversations on what the formula should be. But at the end of the day, we're in it together. We're all Californians, not Republicans or Democrats. Californians first. And as I know, I gave a commencement talk at Berkeley, and I was trying to figure out how to end it. I kind of like that's the way speeches should end now in California. I like to refer to the California flag with the grizzly bear on it, even though the grizzly bear is extinct. Grizzly bear is fierce, it's determinate, it's getting in there, and it's resolute, it gets the job done. So I say, go Bears.